Hopefully you guys are having a wonderful day. Small EXP Lamp back at it again. And today, what we're going to be going over is none other than the recent Raids 2 update. So let me give a little background as to what Raids 2 is if you guys are not aware. Raids 1, Chambers of Xeric, was an update introduced into old school RuneScape January 2017. And since then, it's been about a year and a half, and now we have the second edition of that, which is Raids 2, Theater of Blood. So that is a new update. It's been in game since last Thursday, so at this point a week and a couple days. Now before I talk a little bit more in depth, realize that this is way too early to be able to decide what metas are, what armors or what items from Raids 2 are actually really useful at certain aspects of the game. A lot of this stuff is relatively new, but I'll be giving my thoughts over a lot of the content around Raids 2 that doesn't really change from here on out. More so the hype behind it, the update itself, and really what I saw coming through. We'll begin with some things that I really do enjoy about Raids 2 and just the entire spectacle that went into it. So let's start with the marketing around the Theater of Blood and really how Jagex went about pushing forward for the couple months before Raids 2. Raids 2 has been a big update in game for what is now quite a few months. There's been a lot of hype behind it, a lot of dev effort into it, and overall basically it's been a relatively hyped thing in the RuneScape community. Jagex per usual has done quite a lot of Twitch live streams, a lot of stuff in game, there's a lot of information on Twitter, and they really do allow the community to have as much information on raids as they really could ever ask for. There's live streams 3 to 4 hours a day of devs just doing work on, you know, mechanical stuff with the raids and stuff like that. Like, it is just absolutely insane. Anything you need, it's there. The hype's constantly building in the months leading up to it. Another thing that I love about Jagex and what they do, obviously, they try to make the game as community friendly as possible, with people being able to pretty much dictate what goes into this, releasing polls on the individual items, changing up item stats depending on what players and the community at large think of the items. They've gone back and reworked stuff like the rapier animation because they felt like it wasn't good enough and people were saying that. So they've really been adaptable to pretty much any suggestion we have, and honestly it's something that I feel like it's kind of swept under the rug every now and then, but it's absolutely insane to be able to have all of this stuff at our disposal. So I really did enjoy the lead up to it, the months prior to the update itself. But talking more about the update, the items, honestly, I feel like Jagex has a really hard task whenever they want to put more content into the game, because as you know, old school RuneScape, we really don't, I mean, the community at large doesn't like new content that much. It's very fine line that you run when you put in new content, because if it's too good, people are going to lose their minds, and if it's not good enough, well, all this hype is for nothing. So power creep, obviously something Jagex is very aware of in their game. The potions that they introduced weren't OP and seemed to make a lot of sense in game, since you have stuff like super combat, so why wouldn't you have something like that for range and mage? Just makes sense to be able to do. The rapier is just a little better than a tentacle whip. It's not insanely better. A lot of people look at it and they're like, that's a rapier, that's chaotic rapier, but really if you look at the stats, there's not that much of a difference, and honestly I thought it was pretty manageable. Along with that, the Justicar armor at the moment I feel like is just a really good like concept for the game. Obviously if you put in a new best in slot strength or melee training item, as far as armor goes, people are going to be a little upset, something that takes bandos out of the game. But if you just put in a tank armor, which there really isn't a whole lot of unless you consider Barrow's tank armor, then it kind of filled a void that was just within the game. However, I don't see that there's enough use for tank armor, and we'll get into that more in a little bit. Along with that, the scythe, it's a little early to tell how crazy it's going to be in game. Now, from what I can tell from a lot of DPS calcs, it will be very useful at some certain places, and obviously it's going to hold a pretty high value since it's melee based as well. But with the T-bow already in the game and T-bow not being a game breaking item, I don't think this will be either, because of the high price tag and the fact that not everyone will be running around with a scythe. And then again, this is, I mean, honestly, like, the day of release and the hype that Jagex builds for the Twitch and just the scene on day of release is insane. Whenever there's big updates, you kind of always remember the day it came out and what you were doing. And honestly, watching all the raids was just so amazingly fun. The raids were incredibly hard, which I don't think Jagex planned on it being as hard as it was, but it was fun as could be to watch. The Wooks carries are honestly something that I will probably never soon forget. Though it was absurd to watch him just solo a room single-handedly, just going at it. The dude's an absolute monster, and that was honestly just so much fun to watch. In addition to that, I gotta compliment JX because it really was pretty decently hard. I was surprised with how difficult Raids 2 was, honestly, and just to be able to watch people struggle with it does kind of make it a little bit more fun in my opinion. Now, while I did enjoy a lot of what Raids 2 had to offer, there were some things I wasn't as excited about, and I guess we can kind of start with the fact that you do need 5 people to be able to make a team. With Raids 1, you could have really any amount of people. You can have 1, you can have 30, you can work with anything in between. It's as easy as it comes in regards to finding a team. 5-man, being a strict and hard 5-man team, like you have to have 5, just makes it really difficult because then you might have to kick some friends out if you have too many people that want to go. More than likely, that probably isn't the problem, but you're going to have to deal with not having enough people to go, and that really does kind of ruin it for some people when you could just go with 3 men, potentially. Now, I don't know if they have any plans to change that in the future, but that may be a mechanic that is just kind of hard to work with. Another thing that I didn't think was, it wasn't terrible, like I wasn't mad about it, but it kind of ruined some of the hype, is the fact that since Raids 2 was so hard to complete, it did take people a while to really start pushing items into the game and start bringing them out onto the market. So while you had that initial hype of Raids 2 being released, the items really didn't start seeing the market for a couple to a few days afterwards, and so there kind of is a lull there if you're looking into, newer items, trying to see how good they are, you want to test them out. You really don't have that ability, and anyone that's willing to buy them whenever they first come out, say 2 to 3 days later, they're going to be paying astronomical amounts. So it's going to take a while for people to actually get their hands on this stuff, which does kind of ruin it a little bit. But again, if you want something to be as difficult, you really want it to be a challenge, that's the price you have to pay. So it's not something I can really complain about, but it is something that just ruins the experience a little bit. Now, another thing that isn't really that big of a deal, I just felt like maybe Raids 2 was a little soon after Raids 1. It was only coming a year and a half after and was announced like a year after Raids 1. So if we work on that schedule, I mean, Raids 3 could be out here in another year or another year and a half, somewhere in that time. And I don't know at what point you kind of look at it and you're like, wow, what is this? Why do we have 3 different types of raids? And I don't know. Really, in my mind, I guess the way I see raids, and if it continues as a series, is almost like a skill, but instead of actually bringing a skill to the game, they just decided since people don't want new skills, they'll just make it in the form of PVM. But I mean, that's perfectly fine. I just don't know how serious some players can take raids whenever they start to see like 3 or 4 different types of raids, and kind of really makes you question old school RuneScape a little bit. Minor complaint there. The overall big picture complaint that I've seen a lot of people make, and justifiably so, is that there was a lot of effort put into this update just for a few people to be able to actually use it. Basically, the side arguing that maybe Raids 2 isn't the best is pretty much saying that Raids 2 has been something that a lot of the devs and developers for the game have put time and effort into for the past 6+ months. They've been making this update for quite a while, and the content's really only useful for top tier PVMers with a massive bank. And so a lot of people feel left out. I mean, honestly, like the top 5% of people that play the game can probably do Raids 2, and even at that point you have to have friends that do it, or you have to be experienced yourself, even counting out more of those people. And for that reason, I can understand why a lot of people are just a little disappointed that they are paying for membership, paying for devs to do work that they will probably never be able to obtain themselves. Now, I do understand where they're coming from, and I really do feel for them because, there's really nothing you can do. If you don't have the time, or, you don't care enough to play constantly every day to be able to do what some people do, I could see how you'd feel that that's unfair. But personally, if you look at this from the side of Jagex, there's already so much mid-game to, even high-level content at this point in the game that's like, how do you add more without just, saturating it to the point to what some stuff just isn't even useful? I mean, I don't really know what the alternative is to them making high-end PVM content. I think that's really where the game goes, and that's the way it should be. Now, you could argue maybe this is a little too high-end. I mean, personally, I haven't even done a raid yet. I've watched plenty of them. However, I don't have the skill or the bank to be able to do them at the moment. Now, maybe in the future, once metas kind of figure themselves out and more people are experienced enough to bring me along, maybe I can do it. So I have the hope in the future that maybe I can test out Raids 2. However, at the moment, I personally have it, so I can understand where the people are coming from. However, if you look on the side of Jagex, they only have so much to work with. There's already a ton of content for med-level players, so personally, I side with them, and I think you know, you do what you gotta do, and this has obviously been something almost everyone's enjoyed. So as we are only a week out, time will tell ultimately how good this update is. As far as how I'm feeling right now, I'm feeling a light to decent 8 on this one. Honestly, I feel like it's one of Jax's. But with that said, what did you guys think? Did you guys enjoy raids too? Have you enjoyed the viewer experience? If you have, let me know down below. If you haven't, let me know down below as well. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like. If you're excited for more content to come, make sure to subscribe. And if you really want to know when I upload a new video, hit that bell. But with that said, that's going to be it for me today. Hopefully you guys have a wonderful day, and peace.